Welcome to Around the Track, the most exciting 15 minutes in wealth management by Dynasty Financial Partners and hosted by CEO Shirl Penney.
Welcome to another edition of Around the Track, the most exciting 15 minutes in wealth management. This week, I'm joined by a great friend and business partner, Lawrence Calcano, who is the chairman and CEO of the iCapital network. Lawrence, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you today, Shirl. Thanks for having me.
Okay, look, you've seen the show, so you know the rules. We're going to ask 8 questions. The only rule we have really is that we get around this track together, each of the questions representing one of the furlongs, making up to 8 furlongs in a mile, that we make this virtual journey together in less than 15 minutes.
And they're off.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, iCapital, why the business was started, and what's the mission of the firm.
Sure. Thanks, Shirl. So the founding mission of iCapital was to create a technology-based end-to-end alts platform to serve advisors who've left their wirehouses and set up shop independently. We assumed that, when they left the wires, they would leave behind some of the work that the wires help them with in terms of providing access to managers, operational oversight, et cetera. And so we were really targeting the independents and giving them, a first-class alts platform with access to the best managers. As we got into it, we realized that there was really no technology at all in the industry. And so we began to broaden our mission and are now offering a sophisticated technology stack to the whole industry, really to advisors wherever they choose to practice. So IBDs, RIAs, obviously, and more recently, wirehouses. And that's the goal of the firm, to power the entire industry and giving advisors great access to alternative investments in a technology-enabled way.
That's great. And you guys have been really one of our early stage partners and been a great partner at Dynasty. So thanks for that. And the success that you just highlighted, I think, is significant by any measure. Speaking of success, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the asset base now is sitting somewhere around 74 billion in alternative assets that iCapital has on platform. So I think you sit in a unique position for this next question. We're hearing a lot of people talk about potential, frothy markets, whether it's in the public markets or in private equity and alternative investment markets. Given where you sit in the industry, I'd like to ask your views, also as a former investment banker. What's your take on valuations at a high level?
Sure. So I think, while I'm not a market strategist per se, it's hard not to look at the market and feel like it's a little rich right now. And I would say, more concentrated around a handful of names that obviously people are all interested in. So the Teslas, the Apples, those kind of Google, Facebook, et cetera. And so those companies, which I think represent significant growth opportunities, are just hard to access because of how crowded, if you will, those stocks are. And so frankly, it's hard to buy growth in the public markets, and it's why we like the private market so much. There's, not 4,000 public companies, there's 25 times that in terms of the number of private companies you can get access to. And we think that provides investors with a very significant access to, the top growth names. And frankly, a lot of the returns that, these companies generate are generated during their private phase. And so being able to get in early is particularly important to try to capture a lot of that return. And so we think through the right fund managers, if not directly, you can get much earlier access to growth and, the private companies that provide a lot of this return in a way that's less or uncorrelated to the market broadly.
Great. Thank you for that, Lawrence. Let's take a half step back and maybe talk a little bit about leadership, entrepreneurship. I'm biased a bit because we're partners and we're friends, but I think you're one of the best entrepreneurs and a fantastic leader in wealth management. Maybe ask you, describe yourself. What 3 words maybe would come to mind and why as you think about yourself as a leader and an entrepreneur?
You're kind to say that, Shirl. I would say probably the 3 things that I would think of would be passion or passionate, tenacious, and strategic. I think, as I think about how I spend my time, I'll start with passionate. Like, you cannot start a company in our industry, or frankly any industry, unless you're, passionate about your mission, about your team, about your clients. And to me, that's table stakes. I also think people love being around people who are filled with passion. And I think you're another good example of that in what you've built at Dynasty. Tenacious, we all have good days and we have tough days, and you got to power through anything that you're faced with. And you've got to look at problems every different way to be able to come up with really good solutions. And so I think tenacity is really key. And the other point I'd make about tenacity is that the sort of the opposite of that is what kills companies: complacency. And so when you're tenacious, you don't let yourself slip into complacency, no matter how much you grow over time. And the last thing I'd say is I try to be strategic. I'm always stepping back and trying to think about, where's the industry going to be in 1 year, in 3 years, in 5 years, and what do we need to do as a firm to kind of lead that. And so I spent a lot of time on that, and try to make sure that in any given year, the big priorities we have for that year are setting us up for the longer term and where we see the market going.
Yeah, look, I agree. Complacency turns great businesses into good businesses, and complacency kills good businesses, right?
Right.
So, it's why we hear, those of us that read, Jeff Bezos, annual letter, right? He's talking about always day one, right? Really, running, only the paranoid survive, right? Running scared, and having your firm be the firm that leapfrogs yourself. And you're right, that is a big part of our philosophy here at Dynasty as well.
By the way, paranoid would have been my fourth choice, because I got to tell you, I wake up every day worried about everything.
I do too. From those few hours a night that we sleep, so I can relate to that as well. So look, I think you learn a lot about leadership and a lot about your team when things are really difficult. And this last 12 months, I think we all agree, has been a very challenging time for our teams, certainly for our industry, and for us as leaders. What are a few things that maybe you learned about yourself or your team over the last year that you think will make you a better business or a better leader going forward?
So, I will say, I totally agree. Obviously, it's been a hard year, and there's the old adage that adversity doesn't build, it reveals character. I will tell you, we spent a lot of time on culture as an organization, and I think culture is a huge competitive advantage if you really have one. And I think one of the things that I feel really excited about, probably more than anything that's happened over the last year, is actually how that culture kept us together. When you're not in the same room, the same office, and you're not interacting every day, it's hard to support each other. But the amount of support people gave, both to each other, their teammates, as well as the extra mile they went for their clients, is something I'm really proud about on behalf of our team. It was obviously essential that we do that in this remote workplace. So I feel really good about that. I will tell you personally, I missed walking the floor. I am a floor walker, and I like to have, unscheduled, hey, what's going on? What are you guys working on? What are you thinking about? What are you hearing? And not having the ability to do that has been painful, because there's just no way to do that over Zoom. Try as I did, and you and others try, you just can't replace walking the floor. And so I can't wait to bring us all back together, in an office setting.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of your peers. I feel it myself. I mean, one of the biggest challenges for us, obviously, is continuing to enhance and develop our culture in a remote environment. So I think everyone is excited to being able to walk the floor, as you say, and get back to what maybe is a cyborging type reality, where you can take all the good from what we've learned about tech enablement of our business and combine it, with the personal interaction and the driving of culture. So thanks for that. Lawrence, I also know that you are a great student of the industry, and you're always thinking, where the industry is going. So maybe even at a higher level, let me ask you, what do you think the biggest challenges might be for our industry over the next, let's say, 5 years or so? And then, of course, with any challenges, ultimately come opportunities. So maybe you can tie those together in the response.
Sure. Look, I think the reality is that our industry is really challenged from the perspective of diversity and inclusion. It's frankly not only a moral imperative, it's a practical and business imperative. We came into the pandemic with, I think, as an industry, numbers that were not great from a diversity standpoint, either a gender or racial diversity standpoint. And obviously the pandemic highlighted a lot of the issues we have in society today. And so I really think the industry needs to step back and understand that we as businesses and as an industry get to better answers when we have a diverse group of people contributing to those solutions. We face off against diverse clients, and we need a diverse input to our decision making to be successful in serving those clients. I think that's a huge issue. I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I frankly, I'm so excited about, when you look at our industry, there are amazing entrepreneurs, there are amazing business leaders, and I would much rather have that group of people figuring out how to solve this incredibly important issue than letting the government do it because we didn't do it ourselves. That would be a bad outcome, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. And as an industry set, we need talent. We need as much talent. I mean, this is a critical industry for our country, obviously, and we need talent, and we need to attract, retain, develop, more talent. Whether it's people later in their career transitioning over, new people starting out, coming out of school. And there's a lot of interperspective and reflecting we have to do as an industry, right, to figure out why it is we're not attracting a more diverse group. So I'm excited to hear that you're saying that is a big challenge, but also an opportunity that we have to meet, as I said, longer term, not just for our industry, but I think for our country. So maybe drill down on a little more personal basis for you. One of the questions I like to ask here on the show is to maybe share, to the extent you're willing, maybe a significant mistake or success that you've had over the course of your career, and as you think back on it, what did you learn from it?
I would say, probably the biggest mistake or challenge was I was running a company. It was a big science project. We were actually trying to build within a mouth guard the ability to measure linear and rotational acceleration to the head during contact sports. Obviously, there's a lot of issues with concussions, at all levels, youth levels and adult sports. And so we were trying to figure out how to measure what was really happening to the brain during, the contact activities. And so, we raised a small amount of capital from a quality but smaller venture capital firm, and we got a lead on a team in Seattle. So we were based in New York. The development and science team was in Seattle, and so the reality was we had two big problems. One, developing technology isn't like predictable. You have to iterate. It takes time. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't work. And we didn't have enough capital to take us through that iterative journey in terms of building the technology. And secondly, I talked about culture. By having, the science team in Seattle and the business team on the East Coast, we never started together. We didn't have the ability to build those close personal friendships and relationships that take you through the long nights and challenges you face as a business. And so we ended up having to sell the business to a more well-funded company to take the mission forward. And I will never forget those issues. Make sure when you're financing your business, we've done this at iCapital, that you finance it, not just for perfection, but for the iterative process that technology development really is. And as we talked about, make sure people are together, collaborating, and you've built a strong culture.
Yeah, that's great. Look, I'm sure same for you. A lot of new entrepreneurs will come to me and look for, guidance or advice or mentorship or whatever it might be. And I always, get back to kind of the four key components that determine the success of a new venture: quality of plan, quality of team, capital, do you have it when you need it, and timing. And timing can be not just in the market, it can be in your personal life. Do you have issues going on with family, et cetera? Are you ready for the sacrifice and the commitment and the level of needing to be all in? That's required to be successful as an entrepreneur. So thanks for sharing some of those antidotes with us there. All right, so look, we're turning for home. Two questions left, so let's finish up strong here in the stretch. You were a producer at one point in your life, meaning an investment banker. There's a lot of advisors that are watching this that are making a transition from advisor to CEO. You went from investment banker over the course of your career as an all-star individual contributor, then team leader, then business leader. Any advice that you might share for someone who maybe is about to move into or is just starting as a CEO?
Sure. I think probably really critically, you need to have a very clear idea of where you're going. And I think sometimes people approximate what they want to do as opposed to being very specific about what you want to do. And you set that as your goal. And then each year you need to be very specific about what are the things I need to get done this year that keeps me on the path to my bigger goals. So I think that's the first big thing. The second thing I would say is you need to have the courage of your convictions. We talked about, persistence or tenacity. You can't be put off by the, hundreds of people who will come to you and say, well, I talked to this person and they said that we should do this or we should do that. There's lots of ways you can get thrown off. So you have to have the courage of your convictions, keep your head down and plow through. And at the same time, the third thing is you always have to listen, right? And you have to pay attention and you have to be brutally honest, first and foremost with yourself. Is this working? Were our assumptions correct? Do I have the right team in place? And you've got to answer those questions with brutal candor and then make the changes if and as needed that you need to make to keep you on the mission. And the last point I'd make, and we've touched on this, and I'll say it again because it's critical, it is culture. When you leave some place that has a developed culture, there's a risk or a tendency to take that for granted. When you're starting something new, you have to set the tone for the culture, right? And it's not the one thing, we're going to do this one thing and that's going to set our culture. Culture is the 1,000 little things you do every day that create your value system, that create your approach, that create how you interact with each other. Keep it simple, have the right principles. For us at iCapital, it's everything we do as a team, and everything we do is to support our client success. Really simple. And I say to everybody we hire, it's not hard to work at iCapital. Just remember, we're all a team and we work to have our clients achieve their success.
All right, Lawrence, we're headed towards a photo finish here, and I'm pretty certain that you're going to win the photo finish. The last question I always like to ask a lot of the guests who are on the show is, here in Saratoga on the track that you see behind me, all the teams are gearing up right now for the Triple Crown, the Kentucky Derby, the big goals that they have, within their industry, right? Trying to get the owners and the jockeys and the trainers and all the farms and breeders together to have those big wins that everyone rallies around. As you look out, doesn't have to be necessarily over the next year, but the next several years, what for you personally, and maybe for iCapital, what is the big Kentucky Derby? What is the big prize that you are all running towards?
So I would say for us, Nirvana, our goal is to be, the global alternatives platform that all advisors use globally, no matter how they choose to practice. And at the same time, the general partners use to access this very fragmented advisor marketplace. We want to be that platform that allows those groups of people, and there are others, as you know, other constituents in this whole ecosystem, the custodians, the administrators, others that are important constituents here. We want to be the platform that they rely on and they trust to successfully, run their businesses and achieve their objectives. It's really that simple. At the end of the day, I often think of the question of, when you retire, and you look back on your life, what do you want people to say about you? And for me, it comes down to like, people saying that person, and the company he was involved with made a difference in our success. And if you can do that, if you can look back on a company, if you can look back on a career, and that's how people, view you, that's the Triple Crown. It's not just the Kentucky Derby.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Lawrence. This has been a lot of fun for me and hopefully for you as well. And thank you to all of you for joining us on another edition of Around the Track.